Hey, Tulika, great to see you. And I'm wondering whereabouts in the world you are right now.
Hi, Stuart. Great to see you as well. I'm actually mid travels at the moment on the road between the East Coast and the West Coast of US and Canada over the next few weeks. So you've got me at a nice time in New York.
Yeah, beautiful. What day is it? It must be New York. Thanks so much for spending a bit of time with me. I always enjoy catching up with you and your journey. We're capturing some insights from some of our alumni to help other startups in their journey. Now,
Mhm.
I understand you to be something of a serial entrepreneur. So, could you just give us a bit of a thumbnail of that journey, what that's been like, and then we'll come right up to date?
Yeah, thanks. I've really an energy background and I'm an engineer by training, Stuart. And my first foray into starting up a company in the energy field was actually consulting during the CleanTech 1.0 era, and to really set up and connect large pools of capital in the United Kingdom with India and the development of solar and wind in the early days, and that was the first foray. And while it was excellent and really met a need at the time, over time I realized that what I really wanted to work on was beyond the 25% of CO2 reductions that um, let's say renewable electrification can achieve. So what do we need for the 75%? And that led me to a clean tech, hard tech business in green hydrogen, and SunGreenH2 has really been formed to try and address those 75% of the CO2 emissions that cannot be directly electrified, but perhaps can be sorted out with hydrogen and batteries and other technologies instead.
Beautiful. So, yeah, it sounds like you're describing Sun Green there. I'd love to just know, how did you connect? How did you find them? I know Said's fantastic guy. Just understand how that came about and what especially about Sun Green excited you.
Yeah, so Saeed and I met at Entrepreneur First Incubator in the midst of a pandemic when we were under complete lockdown. So it's a pandemic baby in that sense. And what really excited us the day we sort of got our heads together and figured out each other's individual expertise was that together we could perhaps find a way to address the lowering of green hydrogen costs across electrolyzer technologies. In other words, the industry doesn't really know whether 10 years down the line, alkaline, PEM, AEM, solid oxide, membrane free, or capillary fed electrolyzers are going to dominate. But we figured out that we could utilize our collective expertise really to provide a solution for all electrolyzers to bring down the levelized cost of hydrogen. And that was really the genesis, the kernel, the seed of the idea that led to SunGreenH2 being born. Today we're commercializing the technology.
Brilliant. So having that engineering understanding, a bit of good fortune, but I have a great view that people make their good fortune by being open to opportunity. So it's lovely to hear that sort of history and background. Um, but then there's the other bit, which is actually raising capital. So you can home in on and some of the best team, but that part of then raising capital, what's that been like for you? And I'd love you to start to share some of your insights and some of your tips around that journey, and we'll drill down a little bit more into that.
Yeah, thanks. Stay tuned for an exciting official announcement, on our sort of second round of fundraising that's going live shortly. But what I can share about the journey so far is that we were really incubated and really received a small amount of pre-seed money that really got us started, and that's always very important. The friends and family or the incubator accelerator capital, the small dollars that help you get out of the door and get started with your prototyping, your patenting if you have an IP sensitive business. But I feel like one of the things that we were very disciplined about in terms of our first proper capital raise, which will be announced shortly, was to raise just what we need to deliver the milestones that the business needs rather than dilute ourselves, overmuch. So I think it's worth being very analytical about what your particular business, your particular circumstances, and trying to get your product out into the market really needs, and then being very, very disciplined about raising that, and also with the right sort of investors. So we're aligned with you in your vision and your mission. And we're very proud to have the partners that we have today on board because we really we believe they've chosen us, and likewise, we're very lucky to be able to work with them.
Brilliant. I want to explore two or three strands from that great observation, and maybe the first one is, it's always a balance between exciting investors about the potential, but at the same time being realistic about expectation. How do you strike that balance? Have you learned that, or is it something you still have to work on every time you talk to investors?
So I think it's a lot like delivering a large project on time, on budget, and managing expectations right from the outset. I think you have to have a vision for where you think your business can end up and what it can end up doing. But in terms of delivering it, I think there needs to be a very realistic roadmap, which will get revised a number of times. It's never going to be 100% always. But you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to be realistic in your assumptions. The goals have got to be deliverable, achievable, as they say. And then lots of communication around, why things are changing and how they're changing, I think is what sort of, helps you to, I think maybe extrapolating between the big picture, the blue sky thinking, as well as the sort of concrete milestone-based deliverables, ensure that you're achieving them or explain why you're not. I think that is how we work on a daily basis.
And that goes to, and you started to hint at it, it goes to the type of investors that you work with. I guess they would have to be, reasonably sophisticated to not only understand something of the technology and the market, but also that disciplined approach and not getting carried away with 10x or 50x or 100x possibilities.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we mainly work with institutional investors at this stage, and what we found is a common thread across our investors is a keen understanding or investment thesis, a disciplined investment thesis in the energy transition, and perhaps the green hydrogen space, understanding in many ways that it's one strategic. It's about energy security and decarbonization at the same time, and sort of having realistic expectations of what the market's going to look like today versus 10 years down the road. So there are some common factors.
Yeah, lovely. So you're dealing with people that understand you. It seems to me there's a lot of communication there. So can you over communicate? What's your discipline and approach to keeping investors informed?
So what we like to do is, so for at our board, we obviously have board meetings on a regular basis. But really, for the broader, so that's at the board level. But for the shareholders, what we really like to do is have sort of very regular updates go out. For some folks, it can be quarterly. We like to keep them updated on a monthly basis and really sort of hit the high notes and the low notes to say, here's what's going well, here's what could go better. This is what we've achieved. These are our KPIs, and this is how we're doing. And I think we're trying to get into a sort of a rhythm there, and try to be quite disciplined about it. And of course, between building the business, fundraising, it always helps to have the KPIs articulated out there at all times.
You've almost answered a question that I would like to put, just to be clear, but it strikes me a lot struggle with this is you say planning is one thing, plans and then execution is a different thing. The reality then hits you. So if you have to deliver bad news or news that is not what you were hoping or planning for, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, the entrepreneurship journey and, a startup's life is never all ups. It's always ups and downs. But hopefully at the end of the day, there is something that is very compelling about what you're trying to deliver and you believe in it. And that's what gets you out of bed every day. And in terms of delivering the good with the bad news, very matter of fact, there's never going to be a perfect day. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some. On the whole, hopefully over a sort of trajectory over 2 years, for example, you win more than you lose at the end of the day. However, I think keeping open lines of communication with your investors and with all interested parties is actually in your benefit, because over time what folks are doing is really studying your ability to deliver, and to do what you say you're going to do. And the other thing is also managing expectations while communicating. I think it's really worthwhile saying, here's the possibility of what might happen, and here are the risk factors that may or may not make it happen. And then that way there's like a realistic expectation in terms of probabilities and what's really the drivers in terms of outcomes happening. And I think that helps people understand, doesn't it, in terms of how results come about. Sometimes, the probabilities are stacked against you. Sometimes they're for you. You always celebrate the wins, but you have some basic grasp and understanding of what are the drivers behind, stuff that didn't really work out as expected.
So my takeaway from that and everything you've said so far is you're kind of setting the framework right at the start, and then you're managing as you go along. But what it's also revealing to me is that capital raising is not event. It's not an event. It's a process. So here's my question: how much time are you finding that you're allocating between raising capital and keeping that communication going versus working in and on the business to get it to that next level?
Yeah, I would really put it as there is a huge chunk of your time that almost all your time you want to be spending building the business. And then when you think that you need to be fundraising in advance of that to have like a plan, uh, you know, just all the steps that, Stuart, you and I have been through and we've talked about, set up that data room, really get all that information in there, have your process ready, have your investor list ready, preparation is everything. And then have a very finite amount of time during which you're fundraising. Nothing ever goes according to plan, of course. So you want to build enough buffer there as well in terms of your runway and your expected timelines. But I think maybe being very disciplined, being very process driven, and raising at the right time, and not all the time. We're always open to communicating with potential and existing investors in terms of onward participation. But we're always very clear about what we think are anticipated sort of time ranges for when we'll be raising the next round. And we think that does two things. That takes us off having to run a perpetual evergreen due diligence process, which is in no one's interest, and leaves us free to build the business and deliver the milestones that we need to for a given capital raise. But at the same time, also sort of keeps our eye on the ball to say, look, we're all working towards this. This is going to be the next fundraise, and it's going to be a potential timeline. And that may slip or that may come forward, but you're kind of trying to deliver according to that plan at least, and you're framing it in that way when you're communicating with folks. So communicate on an ongoing basis, I guess. Run a very disciplined process when you actually want to get the deal done.
The only other aspect I really wanted to explore around that was you've sort of implied again that you're dealing with a relatively small number of institutional investors. That keeps the cap table pretty clean and straightforward. I'd just like your views on, if you like, shareholder representation on your board. That takes that chemistry, that dialogue to another level. Do you have any hard and fast rules or guidelines around that you could share?
Yeah, look, I think actually shareholders are partners at the end of the day. We're all aligned in terms of, our incentives and what we're trying to deliver. Hopefully, all of us are working together, to deliver a 100x kind of a result at the end of the day in a very disciplined manner. But so what I would say is that when we think about board composition or really inviting people onto the cap table, even it's about how we can be strategic about it. How are we aligned with the investor? Sometimes you may find that there's a really great term sheet coming along, but perhaps there isn't that meeting of minds, and you can just anticipate that there might be friction along the way. So you want to really construct your like with all things in life, you want to set up a business, you want to set up, your founding relationships, you want to set up your first teams, you want to set up your first investor relationships and ongoing investors in a way that's very cohesive so that that team is delivering at the end of the day together. All incentives are aligned, and these are folks who have a shared vision and mission, but are also trying to, work towards something similar and understand why or where the risks lie and, how things need to happen. So I'd say there's like a few common threads running across the different types of folks who are involved in a startup's journey, certainly in ours. And yeah, you've got to find that right chemistry, I think, with your investors. You don't all have to be alike, but you do have to be able to have a conversation where everybody is bringing a very diverse perspective, and you think that all of you are better off at the end of the day in that board meeting and in that sort of discussion for having come together.
It's a special area, the board, for me, having chaired and been in an exec, that it's a place of respectful, constructive discussion. If you've got that chemistry right, I think that's a big part of the success. Coming right up to now, I'd just love to know, what's in the immediate future for SunGreen. H2 have always been impressed by its breakthrough potential. That's what excited me when I first learned your story over nearly a year ago now. What's on the immediate horizon? Tell Tulika?
Yeah, so our immediate goals are the same as they've ever been. We're on a mission to drive down the cost of green hydrogen and make it affordable so that there is a real incentive across industry globally to adopt green hydrogen as opposed to gray for industrial decarbonization at the end of the day. So we're on a vision to make that happen. We are looking to expand the folks that we're working with across the Asia Pacific region from our base in Melbourne, where our R&D and our pilot production is being set up. And at the same time, we see a huge market opportunity, of course, in the EU, North America region, which is why I'm here at the moment. And what we want to do is we want to build a global company that was born in Singapore and is strategically headquartered there, but then is, of course, delivering via our Melbourne office to the Asia Pacific region. We're working with a lot of customers now in the Japan, South Korea region. Of course, Australia being the largest export market for, I'm going to say this now, green hydrogen, but also green commodities. And I think the headwinds are in the right direction for there to be a great opportunity. And we believe SunGreenH2 has a really valuable proposition here to offer. And we're looking to make that a reality. And we're looking to do that at the same time also across the pond in the United States and the EU. So looking to try and really hit milestones in terms of product and get ready for the next race because it's an onward journey and it's always ongoing, right?
Tulika, it's always a pleasure catching up with you, and wherever in the world it is, I look forward to catching up with you in person next time. So safe travels and good continued success. Lovely to talk to you.
Likewise, thanks, Stuart, so much for having me. I enjoyed every bit of my journey with Startup Bootcamp when we did the Decarbonize program, and I look forward to the continued association and your support. Thank you so much.